There is ongoing debate over whether coal mining should be allowed to go forward in the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains of southern Alberta. For example, in the case of the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, there are locals who would like to see the much needed jobs to keep their communities going, and there are also Indigenous groups who would like to see the economic benefits. But on the other hand, there are concerns being voiced about potential negative impacts of coal mining effluent on the aquatic environment. So without taking sides here, we thought it would be helpful to get some scientific facts on the table for everyone to consider in this debate. So our guest today joins us from North Vancouver, British Columbia. Guy Gilron is a registered professional biologist. He has a master's degree in aquatic sciences in bio and chemistry and has 35 years of experience in water quality, ecotoxicology, and ecological risk assessment relating specifically to effects of chemicals, particularly metals and metalloids on aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. That's quite a background you have there, but Mr. Gilron, welcome to the show. Good to have you
Thanks.
on.
No, it's great to
Yeah.
be here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I should also mention that you're the owner and senior environmental scientist of Borealis Environment Consulting Incorporated.
That's
So
right.
you have a lot going on there. But we welcome you to the show. First of all, even though you sometimes get hired to do environmental impact assessments for coal companies, we do want to make it clear that you are not here to take sides in the debate, right? You're simply giving us scientific facts, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think because things seem to be very polarized these days, people think you're on one side or the other when
Yeah.
you're speaking on a topic. And, I mean, I come from the science, so I'm really speaking for the science, not for, an issue one side or the other. And I understand the reasons why people feel that they're for mining or against mining. But yeah, I'm here just to talk about the science, and I'm
Mhm.
passionate about the science, and I think it needs to be used responsibly, regardless of what you're talking about. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
sure.
And I think probably the biggest concern being raised is the impact of selenium or selenium and what the water supply. So can you maybe explain what exactly selenium is and what are the pros and cons of it?
For sure. So selenium is actually it's a natural element, and actually it's a metalloid. I mentioned that you mentioned that in the introduction. It's a metalloid, so in other words, it has characteristics of metals, but it has other characteristics that metals don't have. And actually, if you go into the Rock or Gem show, you can see this white substance that's called selenite, which is a derivative of selenium. And so selenium is a natural element, and that's an important thing to start off with. It's not a man-made or anthropogenic substance, and so it's natural. And what happens is when you mine, you're extracting minerals from the ground, from the rock. And so when you're extracting something like gold or silver, or in this case metallurgical coal, you have to take some ore that is not the substance that you're looking for. So what you're doing by extracting that is you're breaking up the rock, and the rock is now exposed to the air and to water. And so selenium becomes leached from the rock when you're breaking up the rock and you're increasing the surface area. You're basically exposing it to air and to water. And when you do that, and then the water runs downstream, then you have an increase in selenium that goes into the environment.
Okay, now you mentioned it's a natural element. Is it an essential element though? Is it
It is
necessary?
indeed.
Okay.
It's actually essential for life, and you can talk to some people who are it's important for them to deal with their nutrition, and you'll know that some people take selenium supplements. And when you hear all the stuff in the news, I'm surprised that some people go, "Wait a minute, I'm taking selenium tablets to supplement my diet because we're not getting enough selenium in our diets." Same with livestock. Livestock often require selenium added to their feed in order to prevent diseases. So selenium is actually an essential element, is required for life. And I think the difference with selenium as opposed to other metals and metalloids is that the the sort of distance between when it is essential and when it is toxic is a shorter distance. So in other words, it becomes elevated at a higher concentration, and it affects mostly egg-laying vertebrates. So it's either birds, fish, or amphibians. Other animals that give birth to live organisms aren't affected by selenium as much.
Okay, okay. And then we're told that selenium affects fish a lot more than it does humans and animals. So can you break that down for us?
Yes, exactly. Fish are the most sensitive organisms to selenium. So, a lot of testing is done with different organisms. And in the last 15 years, we've learned a lot about selenium. And so fish are the most sensitive. And so most of the guidelines that are in existence right now actually take, the guidelines and the thresholds for fish toxicity are the ones that protect everything. So if you're protecting fish, you're protecting everything because the fish are the most sensitive. And right now the guidelines are set so that they protect fish.
Okay, so what if you eat a fish that has been affected by selenium?
So yes, I mean obviously you're going to accumulate the selenium in your tissue if you're eating fish that have high selenium in their tissue.
Mhm.
Now, the what we're finding out more and more right now is that selenium does and doesn't bioaccumulate in different environments. So depending on the species of selenium, in other words, the type of selenium, how its oxidation state, and that's what we call it, depending on that, it can accumulate in organisms, including fish. And yes, if you eat fish, you're going to accumulate selenium, but it usually takes a lot of, you have to eat fish all the time, and you have to eat the same fish from the same river or stream that has the selenium in it. So obviously you're going to have to, and there are guidelines for fish consumption, just like there are for mercury. There's also fish consumption guidelines for selenium.
Okay, so obviously it has to be in the right balance. But what happens if a human ingests too much of it?
Well, most of the effects on humans are they're fairly minor effects on humans. It's not like mercury in the sense that you have, nervous system damage or anything like that. There are some human health effects. They're fairly minor. I'm not downplaying it. I mean, certainly you don't want to expose yourself to too much selenium, but I mean, most of the people in BC and Alberta actually, and other parts of the world, are actually deficient in selenium and have to take it as a supplement. So generally speaking, people do not eat enough fish to be of concern. And in fact, if I know some research that people are avoiding fish, for example, because they're afraid of mercury poisoning,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
they eat less fish. But actually, you have to eat a lot of fish in order to get mercury poisoning. But if you don't eat fish, you're also losing out on the beneficial nutrients in fish, like
Hmm.
omega sixes and omega nines.
Yeah. So, in theory, does it mean that if we're able to keep the selenium levels in the water supply safe for fish by default, then the water should remain safe for animals, like in
Absolutely.
irrigated water and for humans in drinking water downstream?
Absolutely, and in fact, I can just illustrate that by saying that the guidelines for selenium for fish for aquatic life is 2 parts per billion, and for drinking water and livestock watering is more like in the 10 to 50 range. So we're protecting fish, and any industry, not just coal mining, any industry is not allowed to discharge water that's gonna affect downstream organisms, and in this case, fish. So if you're, again, like I said before, if you're protecting the fish, you're going to be protecting all the other animals,
Hmm. Okay, so
including humans.
yeah, of course. So some people say that treatments aren't effective over the long term. So what treatment methods are used to keep selenium at acceptable levels?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a topic that another colleague of mine, Gordon McKenna, and I have written about, and what we call it the multiple lines of defense. And so we don't look for a magic bullet of how we treat selenium. Selenium has to be treated at all stages of the life cycle of the mine. So in other words, you need to mitigate. You need to have mitigations in place before you treat the water. So there isn't one, or let's say two. It's not a off-the-shelf Canadian Tire type of treatment system. It's something that has to be customized, and it also has to be planned for in the early stages of mining. One of the things we didn't know in the early days, we didn't know how to mitigate the effect of selenium leaching out of the rock. And so a lot of the rock piles were left open. They weren't covered. They were exposed to water. And so the selenium was leaching out. Now we understand it better. And so when we develop a mine, we actually plan for this, and we place the rock in certain places, we cover it in certain ways, and then if we have residual selenium after that, then we do treatment
Okay.
system.
Yeah. So is there a cumulative effect of multiple coal mines in the same area?
Yes, you can have that for sure. If you're having several coal mines discharging to the same water body, it definitely needs to be addressed, and you need to understand what the concentrations are going to be coming from the different facilities, and then determining whether that is going to have a cumulative effect. Now, just because it has a cumulative effect on like the amount of selenium going into the system, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to accumulate in organisms. So that is site specific. It's very site specific, and so it's very important to understand all of the inputs that are coming into the water body.
Okay. And then because a number of mines in the Crow's Nest Pass have not been reclaimed, are the selenium concentrations already elevated?
I think yeah, I would say to some degree there probably are. There's probably some, especially if those decommissioned mines have not been properly closed, if they haven't been covered, and if those if some of the waste rock could in fact increase the levels. But none of the data that I've seen from that area or anywhere in Alberta are elevated to a level that I would be concerned about yet. I think it's obviously something to look at, and obviously that's one of the reasons why I'm working in this space, is because we need to understand how much there is, we need to understand where it's going, and we need to understand what it's affecting.
Okay. Now, the federal government's coal mining effluent regulations are,
Regulation.
yeah, they're being established, right? And I think they're going to be next year. They're going to be released. So, any idea what kinds of changes we might see with that?
Yes, in terms of selenium, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Yes, in fact, I've been involved in providing input into those regulations, especially in terms of the selenium effluent limits. So what we're going to see with these new regulations is we're going to see, for the first time anywhere in the world, is a selenium effluent limit. And what an effluent limit is the concentration at which selenium can be released at the point of discharge. So at the end of the mining, at the end of the mine, where the water is being discharged into the receiving environment, there will be a limit as to what industries can discharge, and that's new. That's quite a. I think it's the first of its kind. I would say it's the first of its kind, and so it's a bit of a trade-off because as we've been talking about, the fish downstream are sensitive and they're going to need to be protected, and so that's going to be an important point. There are some other parameters, by the way, nitrate and total suspended solids and pH, that are also being regulated, but selenium is the one that's probably the most talked about for sure.
Okay. And Lethbridge City Council just recently voted to reaffirm its opposition to all coal developments that risk damage to the Old Man watershed. So, I think that's kind of the bottom line concern with them. So, can we guarantee that the watershed and our drinking water will remain safe?
Yes, I mean, you're going to these, and I'm glad you asked that question after we talked about the regulations,
Yeah.
because the federal regulations that are coming in and the provincial regulations that are already in place don't allow mines to discharge water that exceeds those thresholds. So, I mean, it's a self-correcting. I'd say it's a self-correcting system. Those worries aren't warranted, because the government guidelines and the scientific advances that we've made in understanding the dynamics of selenium and understanding the effect on the watershed, and the fact that environmental assessments in Canada are the most stringent in the world, I would say should be assurance that it's not going to be a problem.
Wow. That was very interesting, so informative. Guy, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeanette. Appreciate it. Glad to be on.
Wonderful. Guy Gilron is a registered professional biologist and the owner and senior environmental scientist of Borealis Environmental Consulting.